Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Man in America. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. It's great to have you all here tonight, coming to you live from the beautiful country of America. So, as we have tried to understand the dynamics of this war, that I think most of you that are watching, I'm assuming, have realized that there is a war going on. It's not necessarily World War III, it's something much bigger. It's a war on humanity. It is a war from the small group of individuals and powerful people, and we'll get into who or what they might be, against us, we the people. And there's been a lot of speculation against, okay, who is it we're up against? Is it the bankers? Is it the Jews? Is it the Chinese? Is it the Russians? Is it our own government? And I can tell you from my own research, it's not easy to pinpoint exactly who it goes to, because if you trace throughout history, you can see that there's been a massive power play. There has been a battles at that level, right? It's not just that there's this one central enemy that controls everything. Actually, the enemies that we're up against are constantly battling, and the CCP, I would say, is absolutely one of the enemies of mankind. It's one of the enemies of us here in America. Now, there's people that, especially these days, that will quickly jump to the conclusion and say, "Oh, the CCP is a red herring. It's not the CCP because, it's these European bankers or whatever they're saying." But it's important for us to look at the CCP and take them very seriously, and that's what tonight's show is going to be. And look, draw your own conclusions, right? You might even find that within me and my own research that my perspective changes, and I might come to realize something and say, look, I was wrong about that, because I'm constantly growing and learning. It's not easy to understand this stuff all at once. And so in understanding, though, what we're up against, I think it's important to look at history and look at nations like China and the CCP and understand their perspective. Now, there are some accounts, and I'm not going to be going into it deep in this show, that look at what is the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. And yes, it does point back to Yale in China. For one, it points back to the Jesuits. It points back to the various organizations. A lot of money coming out of Europe, actually, that was funding communism in China, that helped Mao, Zedong, get off the ground in the early days of basically introducing communism to China, which we know the absolute havoc that had wreaked since then. And so, but let's just say just because there's a controlling group that say, okay, we want to create some sort of color revolution in China, bring in communism, like we saw what happened with the Soviet Union or whatever. It's never just some random guy, Lenin, that says, hey, I want communism. And it happens. These people they're frontmen, right? They're financed. Okay. So Mao was absolutely financed, right? He got off his, got communism off at the very beginning, specifically through Yale in China, right? So you can trace these things, but the key, though, is that I think it's naive to think that, oh, because this government, because what was put in place was financed or had the initial inertia from this other controlling group, it's naive to think that the communist group is still absolutely to this day being controlled, right? And so that's what's important about this particular speech. So what I'm going to be going through today is this speech that was given by this guy named General Chi Haotian. So here this introduction says, in 2005, the Epoch Times acquired a secret speech given by Defense Minister Chi Haotian to high-level Communist Party cadres sometime before his retirement in 2003. Details given in Chi's speech coincide with previously unpublished defector testimony on the Sino-Russian military plans. So there's a few points to make about this. One is this speech is not confirmed, so take it as you will, okay? It was passed to the Epoch Times. It was leaked. The Epoch Times published it back in 2005. Now, I happen to trust the Epoch Times immensely, especially with anything related to China. So I'm not one to quickly dismiss this. And if you read, and I'll be going through a speech with you today, if you look at the language of it, and you look at the foreshadowing of where we're at now, it's hard to ignore this speech. Now, let's take a quick step back and look at General Chi Haotian. I'll pull him up. Real guy. He's actually still alive. Very, very high level general. very involved in many aspects of China's military strategy and everything. And his from 1993 to 2003, he was the Minister of National Defense. And so the idea is that this speech was given during his tenure as the Minister of National Defense. So this, very obviously a very high level guy. Now, the speech itself, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just going to be reading this speech. Like this is today's show. I'm going to be reading this speech. It might take upwards of 45 minutes to an hour. I mean, it's a pretty long speech, but I can tell you it's absolutely riveting. I've read through it a handful of times. I've referenced it in a lot of my work, and it's hard to ignore the information presented in this speech. And I'll be getting into that. Now, one thing I'll tell you before I jump into it, just as a to kind of frame your thinking, is that it's important to understand how the Chinese, and how specifically the Chinese Communist Party views itself in history. You can see that their perspective, if you take this speech for what it is that their perspective, they would never bow down to some European master. So even if some European group financed and got them off the ground, you can see that they would use that particular group until they had enough power to then take over that group, right? There's a very common saying in China. It says, one mountain is not large enough for two tigers, right? You can't have two leaders on one mountain. And this is one of the key points here, is that when we look at who is vying for global control, the CCP is absolutely vying for global control. It's not going to, in their world, it's not going to be some guys out of Europe that are calling the shots, or George Soros or whatever. The CCP, they look at themselves as they want to be the rulers of the world, as you'll see as evidence in this particular speech. So I'm going to read this to you, and it is absolutely gripping. And then afterwards, we will have a recap and a little bit of discussion about it. One thing I'll say just before I jump in and get started, first off, if you're watching me on Rumble, which I hope you are, because Rumble is absolutely amazing. It looks like we've got 1,500 or so watching live right now, which is great for the start of the stream. Make sure you're following the Rumble channel. Honestly, right now, just hit that green follow button. Make sure you're following my channel. The other thing is a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, which is Heaven's Harvest. Okay, so just a quick mention of this. If you don't have food stored up, that's your own choice, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Look, as we're heading into election season, like, the deep state is desperate. We've seen all kinds of attacks on food facilities, on anything related to food. You have the bird flu. They're burning millions of chickens. In my opinion, all of this is to engineer famine and to engineer food shortages, right? They know that if they can control our food, they can control us. So one of the best things that you can do is to have a good supply of stored food. Now, if you can have chickens and gardens, great. All that stuff is really good. But I highly recommend having at least 3 to 6 months of stored backup food, right? Food that hopefully you never use it, but if you do, say 10 years from now or 5 years from now, if you have to get it, you can feed your family for at least a couple of months. Now, there's a lot of companies that sell this stuff. I've researched tons of them. A lot of them, what they do is they put a bunch of junk calories in there. That way they can say, hey, look, we're the cheapest, per calorie. Right, Heaven's Harvest. These guys are amazing. They're strong Christian patriots. I know the owners quite well, and as you can see on their website here, you can see they've got all kinds of storable food buckets, all the stuff. It's high quality. You can get organic if you want to, and if you use promo code Seth, SETH, you'll save 15% on your entire order. So promo code Seth. Its website is heavensharvest.com. That will be in the description below. So look, do an audit. How many months of food do you have? Because if tomorrow the grocery stores shut down because of a grid failure or whatever it is, it's going to be too late to go buy your storable food. So honestly, I know right now we're live. Don't pause it right now, right? Watch the show. As soon as the show finishes, go to heavensharvest.com and buy your storable food. You will not regret it. Trust me. Okay. Getting into the speech of tonight. Okay. The secret speech of General Chi Haotian. So in 2005, the Epoch Times acquired a secret speech given by Defense Minister Chi Haotian to high-level Communist Party cadres sometime before his retirement in 2003. Details given in Chi's speech coincide with previously unpublished defector testimony on the Sino-Russian military plans. The speech is as follows, and I'll let you know. So this speech I'm reading, this is from Jeff Nyquist's website. The link to the speech is in the description of the show. It's jrnyquist.blog. Jeff Nyquist, J.R. Nyquist, brilliant guy on China. He's been a guest on this show many, many times. So that this is where I'm reading from. Okay. Comrades, I'm very excited today because the large-scale online survey, Sina.com, that was done for us showed that our next generation is quite promising and our party's cause will be carried on. And answering the question, quote, will you shoot at women, children, and prisoners of war, end quote, more than 80% of the respondents answered in the affirmative, exceeding by far our expectations. Today, I'd like to focus on why we asked Sina.com to conduct this online survey among our people. My speech today is a sequel to my speech last time, during which I started with a discussion of the issue of the three islands, where I mentioned the 20 years of the idyllic theme of peace and development had come to an end and concluded that modernization under the saber is the only option for China's next phase. I also mentioned we have a vital stake overseas. Today, I'll speak more specifically on these two issues. And just to tell you that as I'm getting into this, and as I'm reading this, you'll see later in the speech that what the Chi Haotian lays out is basically why China will hit a point where they can no longer feed their people with their land and why they need to colonize other countries such as America, Canada, Australia, because they need our farmland. So this is what the central theme of this is, the recognition that China cannot continue as it is. The population boom is not sustainable. And so they will need to actually then seize America, Canada, Australia, et cetera, to be able to feed their people. And then he goes into the details of how they will be able to do that, the weapons they will use, et cetera. So just giving you that framing so that way you can see where this is going. Okay. The central issue of this survey appears to be whether one should shoot at women, children, and prisoners of war, but its real significance goes far beyond that. Ostensibly, our intention is mainly to figure out what the Chinese people's attitude toward war is. If these future soldiers do not hesitate to kill even non-combatants, they'll naturally be doubly ready and ruthless in killing combatants. Therefore, the responses to the survey questions may reflect the general attitude people have towards war. So my guess is that this survey they did this on Sina.com, that it was a survey of the general public in some sense to basically understand and ask them their stance towards war and whether they'll basically shoot innocent women and children if China goes to war. And he's saying that, 80% of the people said, they would kill innocent women and children if they're at war. Actually, however, it's not our genuine intention. The purpose of the CCP's Central Committee in conducting this survey is to probe people's minds. We wanted to know if China's global development will necessitate massive deaths in enemy countries. Will our people endorse that scenario? Will they be for or against it? As everyone knows, the essence of Comrade Xiaoping's thinking is development is the hard truth. And Comrade Jintao has also pointed out repeatedly and emphatically that development is our top priority, which should not be neglected for even a moment. But many comrades tend to understand development in its narrow sense, assuming it to be limited to domestic development. The fact is, our development refers to the great revitalization of the Chinese nation, which of course is not limited to the land that we have now, but also includes the whole world. Why do I put it this way? Both Comrade Liu Huaqing, one of the leaders of the old generation in our party, and Comrade He Xin, a young strategist of our party, have repeatedly stressed the theory regarding the shift of the center of world civilization. Our slogan of revitalizing China has this way of thinking as its basis. You may look into the newspapers and magazines published in recent years or go online to do some research to find out who raised the slogan of national revitalization first. It was Comrade He Xin. Do you know who He Xin is? He may look aggressive and despicable when he speaks in public with his sleeves and pants all rolled up, but his historical vision is a treasure our party should cherish. In discussing this issue, let's start from the beginning. As everyone knows, According to the views propagated by Western scholars, humanity as a whole originated from one single mother in Africa. Therefore, no race can claim racial superiority. However, according to the research conducted by most Chinese scholars, the Chinese are different from other races on Earth. We did not originate in Africa. Instead, we originated independently in the land of China. The Peking man at Chi Haotian that we are familiar with represents a phase of our ancestors' evolution. The project of searching for the origins of the Chinese civilization currently undertaken in our country is aimed at a more comprehensive and systematic research on the origin, process, and development of the ancient Chinese civilization. We used to say Chinese civilization has had a history of 5,000 years, but now many experts engaged in research in varied fields, including archaeology, ethnic cultures, and regional cultures, have reached consensus that the new discoveries, such as the Hongshan culture in the northeast, the Linghan culture in the Zhejiang province, and the Jinsha ruins in Sichuan province, and the Yongzhou Shun Emperor cultural site in Henan province are all compelling evidence of the existence of China's early civilization. And they prove that China's rice-growing agricultural history alone can be traced back as far as 8 to 10,000 years. This refutes the concept of 5,000 years of Chinese civilization. Therefore, we can assert that we are the product of cultural roots of more than 1,000,000 years and a single Chinese entity of 2,000 years. This is the Chinese entity of 2,000 years. This is the Chinese nation that calls itself descendants of Yan and Huang, the Chinese nation that we are so proud of. Hitler's Germany had once bragged that the German race was the most superior race on earth, but the fact is our nation is far superior to the Germans. During our long history, our people have disseminated throughout the Americas and the regions along the Pacific Rim, and they became Indians in the Americas and East Asian ethnic groups in South Pacific. We all know that on account of our national superiority during the thriving and prosperous Tang Dynasty, our civilization was at the peak of the world. We were the center of the world civilization, and no other civilization in the world was comparable to ours. Later on, because of our complacency, narrow-mindedness, and the self-enclosure of our own country, we were surpassed by the Western civilization, and the center of the world shifted to the West. In reviewing history, one may ask, will the center of the world shift back to China? Comrade He Xin put it in his report to the Central Committee in 1988. If the fact is that the center of leadership of the world was located in Europe as of the 18th century, then later shifted to the United States in the mid-20th century, the center of leadership of the world will shift to the east of our planet. And the east, of course, mainly refers to China. Actually, Comrade Liu Huanqing made similar points in the 1980s. Based on historical analysis, he pointed out that the center of the world civilization is shifting. It shifted from the east to Western Europe and later to the United States. Now it is shifting back to the east. Therefore, if we refer to the 19th century as the British century and the 20th century as the American century, then the 21st century will be the Chinese century. To understand conscientiously this historical law and to greet the advent of the Chinese century in the historical mission of our party. As we all know, at the end of the last century, we built the altar to the Chinese century in Beijing. At the very moment of the arrival of the new millennium, the collective leadership of the party's Central Committee gathered there for a rally, upholding the torches of Chi Haotian to pledge themselves to get ready to greet the arrival of the Chinese century. We were doing this to follow the historical law and setting the realization of the Chinese century as the goal of our party's endeavors. Later, in the political report of our party's 16th National Congress, we established that national revitalization should be our great objective and explicitly specified in our new party constitution that our party is the pioneer of the Chinese people. All these steps marked a major development in Marxism, reflecting our party's courage and wisdom. As we all know, Marx and his followers have never referred to any communist party as a pioneer of a certain people. Neither did they say that national revitalization could be used as a slogan of the Communist Party. Even Comrade Mao Zedong, a courageous national hero, only raised the banner of the global proletarian revolution. But even he did not have the courage to give the loudest publicity to the slogan of national revitalization. We must greet the arrival of the Chinese century by raising high the banner of national revitalization. How should we fight for the realization of the Chinese century? We must borrow the precious experiences in human history by taking advantage of the outstanding fruition of human civilization and drawing lessons from what happened to other ethnic groups. The lessons include the collapse of communism in the former Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, as well as the defeats of Germany and Japan in the past. Recently, there has been much discussion of the lessons of the collapse of communism in the former Soviet Union and Eastern European countries, so I will not dwell on them there. Today, I'd like to talk about the lessons of Germany and Japan. As we all know, Nazi Germany also placed much emphasis on the education of the people, especially the younger generation. The Nazi Party and government organized and established various propaganda and educational institutions, such as the Guiding Bureau of National Propaganda, Department of National Education and Propaganda, Supervising Bureau of Worldview Study and Education, and Information Office, all aimed at instilling into the people's minds from elementary schools to colleges the idea that the German people are superior, and convincing people that the historical mission of the Aryan people is to become the lords of the earth, whose right it is to rule over the world. Back then, the German people were much more united than we are today. Nonetheless, Germany was defeated and under shame, along with its ally Japan. Why? We reached some conclusions at the study meetings of the Politburo in which we were searching for the laws that governed the vicissitudes of big powers and trying to analyze Germany and Japan's rapid growth. When we decide to revitalize based on the German model, we must not repeat the mistakes they made. Specifically, the following are the fundamental causes for the defeat. First, they had too many enemies all at once, as they did not adhere to the principle of eliminating enemies one at a time. Second, they were too impetuous, lacking the patience and perseverance required for great accomplishments. Third, when it came time for them to be ruthless, they turned out to be too soft, therefore leaving troubles that resurfaced later on. Let's presume that back then, Germany and Japan had been able to keep the United States neutral and had fought a protracted war step by step on the Soviet front. If they had adopted this approach, gained some time to advance their research, eventually succeeded in obtaining the technology of nuclear weapons and missiles, and launched surprise attacks against the U.S. and the Soviet Union using them, then the U.S. and the Soviet Union would not have been able to defend themselves and would have had to surrender. Little Japan, in particular, made an egregious mistake in launching a sneak attack on Pearl Harbor. The attack did not hit the vital parts of the United States. Instead, it dragged the U.S. into the war, into the ranks of the gravediggers that eventually buried the German and Japanese fascists. Of course, if they had not made these three mistakes and won the war, history would have been written in a different fashion. If that had been the case, China would not be in our hands. Japan might have relocated their capital to China and ruled over China. Afterwards, China and the whole of Asia under Japan's command would have been brought into full play. The Oriental wisdom conquered the West, ruled by Germany, and unified the whole world. This is irrelevant, of course, no more digressions. So the fundamental reason for the defeats of Germany and Japan is that history did not arrange for them to be lords of the earth, for they are, after all, not the most superior race. Ostensibly, in comparison, today's China is alarmingly similar to Germany back then. Both of them regard themselves as the most superior races. Both of them have a history of being exploited by foreign powers and are therefore vindictive. Both of them have the tradition of worshiping their own authorities. Both of them feel they have seriously insufficient living space. Both of them raise high the two banners of nationalism and socialism and label themselves as National Socialism. Both of them worship one state, one party, one leader, one doctrine. And yet, if we really are to make a comparison between Germany and China, then, as Comrade Jongsman put it, Germany belongs to the pediatrics. Too trivial to be compared. How large is Germany's population? How big is its territory? And how long is its history? We estimate we eliminated 8 million nationalist troops in only 3 years. How many enemies did Germany kill? They were in for power for a transient period of little more than a dozen years before they perished, while we are still energetic after being around for more than 80 years. Our theory of shifting the center of civilization is, of course, more profound than Hitler's theory of the lords of the earth. Our civilization is profound and broad, which has determined that we are so much wiser than they were. Our Chinese people are wiser than the Germans because fundamentally our race is superior to theirs. As a result, we have a longer history, more people, and larger land area. On this basis, our ancestors left us with the two most essential heritages, which are atheism and great unity. It was Confucius, the founder of our Chinese culture, who gave us these heritages. The heritage determined that we have a stronger ability to survive than the West. That is why the Chinese race has been able to prosper for so long. We are destined not to be buried by either heaven or earth, no matter how severe the natural, man-made, and natural disasters. This is our advantage. Take response to war as an example. The reason the United States remains today is it has never seen war on its mainland. Once its enemies aim at the mainland, these enemies would reach Washington before its Congress finishes debating and authorizes the president to declare war. But for us, we don't waste time on these trivial things. Comrade Deng Xiaoping once said the party's leadership is prompt in making decisions. Once a decision is made, it is immediately implemented. There's no wasting time on trivial things like in capitalist countries. This is our advantage. Our party's democratic centralism is built on the tradition of great unity. Although fascist Germany also stressed high-level centralism, they only focused on power of the top leader but ignored the collective leadership of the central group. That's why Hitler was betrayed by many later in his life, which fundamentally depleted the Nazis of their war capacity. What makes us different from Germany is that we are complete atheists. While Germany was primarily a Catholic and Protestant country, Hitler was only half atheist. Although Hitler also believed that ordinary citizens had low intelligence and that leaders should therefore make decisions, and although German people worshipped Hitler back then, Germany did not have the tradition of worshiping sages on a broad basis. Our Chinese society has always worshipped sages, and that is because we don't worship any god. Once you worship a god, you can't worship a person at the same time unless you recognize the person as the god's representative like they do in Middle Eastern countries. On the other hand, once you recognize a person as a sage, of course, you want him to be your leader. This is the foundation of our democratic centralism. The bottom line is only China is a reliable force in resisting the Western parliament-based democratic system. Hitler's dictatorship in Germany was perhaps but a momentary mistake in history. Maybe you have now come to understand why we recently decided to further promulgate atheism. If we let theology from the West into China and empty us from the inside, if we let all Chinese people listen to God and follow God, who will obediently listen to us and follow us? If the common people don't believe Comrade Hu Jintao is a qualified leader, question his authority, and want to monitor him, if the religious followers in our society question why are we leaving God in churches, can our party continue to rule China? So, folks, this is an important part of this in understanding the role of atheism in communist China and from the CCP, and this is why they allow certain religions, but they're very heavily edited. There's a state version of Christianity, for instance, a state-approved Bible, right? If you have a regular Bible, King James Bible, or Red Letter Bible, whatever it is, you have your Bible that you have sitting here in your home in America. If you take it into China, you can get arrested for that, right? There's a massive persecution of underground house Christians in China that don't want to follow the atheist, version of communism, or that they don't want to follow the communist version of China. Right. This is also why the spiritual group Falun Gong was such a huge threat to China, because it came out in the 90s and it brought back this huge wave of spiritual culture back into China, and a reverence towards heaven, a belief in God and in everything. And the CCP, they couldn't have that. So in 99, that's why Jiang Zemin outlawed the practice, because at that time, estimates were between 70 and 100 million people that were practicing Falun Gong in China. So this new religion basically had come out. And the CCP, at first it spread really quickly, but then they said, oh my goodness, there's all these people believing in something higher than the Communist Party, so we got to get rid of it. So that's the persecution started in 99, and it continues to this day. So it's important to understand the role of atheism in China and why they hate religion so much, because as he revealed in here, if people believe in God, they won't believe in the party. And that's a fundamental thing. Okay, so Germany's dream to be Lord of the Earth failed because ultimately history did not bestow this great mission upon them. But the three lessons Germany learned from experience are what we ought to remember as we complete our historic mission and revitalize our race. The three lessons are: firmly grasp the country's living space, firmly grasp the party's control over the nation, and firmly grasp the general direction toward becoming the Lord of the Earth. Next, I'd like to focus on these three issues. The first issue is living space. This is the biggest focus of the revitalization of the Chinese race. In my last speech, I said that the fight over basic living resources, including land and ocean, is the source of the vast majority of wars in history. This may change in the information age, but not fundamentally. Our per capita resources are much less than those of Germany back then. In addition, economic development in the last 20 plus years has had a negative impact, and climates are rapidly changing for the worse. Our resources are in very short supply. The environment is severely polluted, especially that of soil, water, and air. Not only our ability to sustain and develop our race, but even its survival is gravely threatened to a degree much greater than that faced by Germany back then. Anyone who has been to Western countries knows that their living space is much better than ours. They have forests alongside highways, while we can hardly have any trees by our streets. Their sky is often blue with white clouds, while our sky is covered by a layer of dark haze. Their tap water is clean enough for drinking, while even our groundwater is so polluted it can't be drunk without filtering. They have few people in the streets, and 2 or 3 people can occupy a small residential building. In contrast, our streets are always crawling with people, and several people have to share one room. Many years ago, there was a book titled Yellow Catastrophes. It said that due to our following the American style of consumption, our limited resources would not long support the population, and society would collapse once our population reaches 1.3 billion. Now, our population has already exceeded this limit, and we are now relying on imports to sustain our nation. It's not that we haven't paid attention to this issue. The Ministry of Land Resources is specialized in this issue. But the term living space, Lebensraum, is too closely related to Nazi Germany. The reason we don't want to discuss this too openly is to avoid the West's association of us with Nazi Germany, which could in turn reinforce the view that China is a threat. Therefore, in our emphasis on Haotian's new theory, human rights are just living rights. We only talk about living but not space, so as to avoid using the term living space. From the perspective of history, the reason that China is faced with the issue of living space is because Western countries established colonies ahead of Eastern countries. Western countries established colonies all around the world, therefore giving themselves an advantage on the issue of living space. To solve this problem, we must lead the Chinese people outside of China so they could develop outside of China. The second issue is our focus on the leadership capacity of the ruling party. We've done better on this than their party. Although the Nazis spread their power to every aspect of the German national government, they did not stress the absolute leadership position like we have. They did not take the issue of managing the power of the party as a first priority, which we have. When Comrade Mao Zedong summarized the 3 treasures of our party's victory in conquering the country, he considered the most important treasure to be developing the Chinese Communist Party and strengthening its leadership position. We have to focus on 2 points to fortify our leadership position and improve leadership capacity. The first is to promote the 3 represents theory, stressing that our party is the pioneer of the Chinese race in addition to being the pioneer of the proletariat. Many citizens say in private, we never voted for you, the Communist Party, to represent us. How can you claim to be representatives? There's no need to worry about this issue. Comrade Mao Zedong said that if we could lead the Chinese people outside of China, resolving the lack of living space in China, the Chinese people will support us. At that time, we don't have to worry about the labels of totalitarianism or dictatorship. Whether we can forever represent the Chinese people depends on whether we can succeed in leading the Chinese people out of China. The second point, whether we can lead the Chinese people out of China, is the most important determinant of the CCP's leadership position. Why do I say this? Everyone knows that without the leadership of our party, China would not exist today. Therefore, our highest principle is to forever protect our party's leadership position. Before June 4th, we realized vaguely that as long as China's economy is developed, people would support and love the Communist Party. Therefore, we had to use several decades of peacetime to develop China's economy. No matter what isms, whether it is a white cat or a black cat, it is a good cat if it can develop China's economy. But at that time, we did not have mature ideas about how China would deal with international disputes after its economy becomes developed. Comrade Xiaoping said then that the main themes in the world were peace and development. But the June 4th riot gave our party a warning and gave us a lesson that is still fresh. The pressure of China's peaceful evolution makes us reconsider of the 2 main themes of our time. these two main things of our time, we see that neither of these two issues, peace and development, have been resolved. The Western oppositional forces always change the world according to their own visions. They want to change China and use peaceful evolution to overturn the leadership of the Communist Party. Therefore, if we only develop the economy, we still face the possibility of losing control. The June 4th riot almost succeeded in bringing a peaceful transition. If it were not for the fact that a large number of veteran comrades were still alive and at a crucial moment they removed Zhao Ziyang and his followers, then we would all have been put in prison. After death, we would have been too ashamed to report to Marx. Although we have passed the test of June 4th, after our group of senior comrades pass away without our control, peaceful evolution may still come to China like it did the former Soviet Union. In 1956, they suppressed the Hungarian incident and defeated the attacks by Tito's revisionists of Yugoslavia, but they could not withstand Gorbachev 30-some years later. Once those pioneering senior comrades died, the power of the Communist Party was taken away by peaceful evolution. After the June 4th riot was suppressed, we've been thinking about how to prevent China from peaceful evolution and how to maintain the Communist Party's leadership. We thought it over and over again, but did not come up with any good ideas. If we do not have good ideas, China will inevitably be changed peacefully, and we will all become criminals in history. After some deep pondering, we finally come to this conclusion. Only by turning our developed national strength into the force of a striking fist outward, only by leading people to go out can we win forever the Chinese people's support and love for the Communist Party. Our party will then stand on invincible ground, and the Chinese people will have to depend on the Communist Party. They will forever follow the Communist Party with their hearts and minds, as was written in the couplet frequently seen in the countryside some years ago. Quote, "Listen to Chairman Mao, follow the Communist Party." Therefore, the June 4th riot made us realize that we must combine economic development with preparation for war and leading the people to go out. Therefore, since then, our national defense policy has taken a 180-degree turn, and we have since emphasized more and more combining peace and war. Our economic development is all about preparing for the needs of war. Publicly, we still emphasize economic development as our center, but in reality, economic development has war as its center. We have made tremendous effort to construct the Great Wall Project to build up along our coastal and land frontiers, as well as around large and medium-sized cities, a solid underground Great Wall that can withstand a nuclear war. We are also storing all necessary war materials. Therefore, we will not hesitate to fight a third world war so as to lead the people to go out and ensure the party's leadership position. In any event, we, the CCP, will never step down from the stage of history. We'd rather have the whole world or even the entire globe share life and death with us than step down from the stage of history. Isn't there a nuclear bondage theory? It means that since nuclear weapons have bound the security of the entire world, all will die together if death is inevitable. In my view, there is another kind of bondage, and that is the fate of our party is tied up with that of the whole world. If we, the CCP, are finished, China will be finished, and the whole world will be finished. Our party's historical mission is to lead the Chinese people to go out. If we take the long view, we will see that history has led us on this path. First, China's long history has resulted in the world's largest population, including Chinese in China as well as overseas. Second, once we open our doors, the profit-seeking Western capitalists will invest capital and technology in China to assist our development so that they can occupy the biggest market in the world. Third, our numerous overseas Chinese help us create the most favorable environment for the introduction of foreign capital, foreign technology, and advanced experience into China. Thus, it is guaranteed that our reform and open door policy will achieve tremendous success. Fourth, China's great economic expansion will inevitably lead to the shrinkage of per capita living space for the Chinese people, and this will encourage China to turn outward and search for new living space. Fifth, China's great economic expansion will inevitably come with significant development in our military forces, creating conditions for our expansion overseas. Ever since Napoleon's time, the West has been alert for the possible awakening of the sleeping lion that is China. Now, the sleeping lion is standing up and advancing into the world and has become unstoppable. What is the third issue we should clinch firmly in order to accomplish our historical mission of national renaissance? It is to hold firmly onto the big issue of America. This appears to be shocking, but the logic is actually very simple. So for folks that are just joining in, I'm reading a leaked speech from the China Defense Minister, Chi Haotian, that came sometime before his retirement in 2003. So probably around the turn of the century at that time. So this is just now getting into it. Kind of set up the historical precedent. It set up this belief that that China is the superior race, the Chinese people are the superior race, and why they believe that they are. It's now their turn. It's the Chinese century. It's their turn to rule the world. And so you can also see so far in this that for people that think, oh, the China's a paper tiger, it's a red herring, that they're being controlled by the Europeans. I mean, for me, reading this speech, it's like, no, these people aren't bowing down to anybody that's got white skin. Like, they will not submit to the Western rulers and the Western oligarchs. They will take it to their death. And I'm talking about the CCP, right? The CCP, they will take it to their death before they actually bow down. Okay, so now let's getting on to the big issue of America, and this is where it gets really juicy, for lack of a better word. So he says, this appears to be shocking, but the logic is actually very simple. Comrade Hushin put forward a very fundamental judgment that is very reasonable. He asserted in his report to the Party Central Committee, the Renaissance of China is in fundamental conflict with the Western strategic interest, and therefore will inevitably be obstructed by the Western countries doing everything they can. So, only by breaking the blockade formed by the Western countries, headed by the United States, can China grow and move toward the world. Would the United States allow us to go and gain new living space? First, if the United States is firm in blocking us, it's hard for us to do anything significant to Taiwan, Vietnam, India, or even Japan. So how much more living space can we get? It's very trivial. Only countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia have the vast land to serve our need for mass colonization. So folks, I mean, now they're getting into this, talking about, basically, if you look at the whole thing, they know that China's land resources will not sustain their nation, and that the longer that goes on for, the people will lose trust in the government, so that they will be looking outward. They'll be forming that fist and looking outward and colonizing. So literally, like, he's outlaying here, get into the plan of how they need to colonize places like America so they can feed their population and have more room, because they've grown out of their space. That's where we're at in this, okay? Therefore, solving the issue of America is the key to solving all other issues. First, this makes it possible for us to have many people migrate there and even establish another China under the same leadership of the CCP. So folks, here, it can't be any more blunt, right? That they want to turn America into another China that is still under the command of the CCP. Okay? That's it. He continues, America was originally discovered by the ancestors of the yellow race, but Columbus gave credit to the white race. We, the descendants of the Chinese nation, are entitled to the possession of the land. So, okay, all right, so folks, here he's going even further and saying, okay, it wasn't Columbus that discovered America, it was actually the Chinese. So by virtue of that, because the Chinese discovered America, the CCP actually should be able to claim control and ownership of America. Okay. It is said that the residents of the yellow race have a very low social status in the United States. We need to liberate them. Second, after solving the issue of America, the Western countries of Europe would bow to us, not to mention Taiwan, Japan, and other small countries. Therefore, solving the issue of America is the mission assigned to the CCP members by history. Right? So, folks, this is real. They believe that getting rid of America is the mission assigned to the CCP members by history. I sometimes think how cruel it is for China and the United States to be enemies that are bound to meet on a narrow road. Do you remember a movie about Liberation Army troops led by Liu Bocheng and Deng Xiaoping? The title is something like Decisive Battle in the Central Plains. There's a famous remark in the movie that is full of power and grandeur. Quote, the enemies are bound to meet on a narrow road. Only the brave will win, end quote. It is this kind of fighting to win or die spirit that enabled us to seize power in mainland China. It is historical destiny that China and the United States will come to unavoidable confrontation on the narrow path to fight each other. The United States, unlike Russia and Japan, has never occupied and hurt China and also assisted China in its battle against the Japanese. But it will certainly be an obstruction and the biggest obstruction. In the long run, the relationship of China and the United States is one of a life and death struggle. Sorry, folks, need to get some water in me. One time, some Americans came to visit and tried to convince us that the relationship between China and the United States is one of interdependence. Comrade Xiaoping replied in a polite manner, "Go tell your government China and the US do not have such a relationship that is interdependent and mutually reliant." Actually, Comrade Xiaoping was being too polite. He could have been more frank. The relationship between China and the US is one of life and death struggle. Of course, right now, it is not the time to openly break up with them yet. Our reform and opening to the outside world still rely on their capital and technology. We still need America. Therefore, we must do everything we can to promote our relationship with America, learn from America in all aspects, and use America as an example to reconstruct our country. How have we managed our foreign affairs in these years, even if we had to put on a smiling face in order to please them, even if we have to give them the right cheek after they hit our left cheek, we still must endure in order to further our relationship with the United States. Do you remember the character of Wu Xun in the movie of the story of Wu Xun? In order to accomplish his mission, he endured so much pain and suffering, so much beating and kicking. The US is the only successful country in the world today. Only after we have learned all of its useful experiences can we replace it in the future. Even though we are presently imitating the American tone, China and the United States rely on each other and share honor and disgrace. We must not forget that the history of our civilization repeatedly has taught us that one mountain does not allow two tigers to live together. We must also never forget what Comrade Xiaoping emphasized: refrain from revealing ambitions and put others off the track. The hidden message is we must put up with America. We must conceal our ultimate goals, hide our capabilities, and await the opportunity. In this way, our mind is clear. Why have we not updated our national anthem with something peaceful? Why did we not change the anthem's theme of war? Instead, when revising the Constitution this time, for the first time, we must clearly specify March of the Volunteers as our national anthem. Thus, we will understand why we constantly talk loudly about the Taiwan issue, but not the American issue. We all know the principle of doing one thing under the cover of another. If ordinary people can only see the small island of Taiwan in their eyes, then you, as the elite of our country, should be able to see the whole picture of our cause. Over these years, according to Comrade Xiaoping's arrangement, a large piece of our territory in the north has been given up to Russia. Do you really think our party committee is a fool? To resolve the issue of America, we must be able to transcend conventions and restrictions. In history, when a country defeated another country or occupied another country, it could not kill all the people in the conquered land because back then you could not kill people effectively with sabers or long spears or even with rifles and machine guns. Therefore, it was impossible to gain a stretch of land without keeping the people on that land. However, if we conquered America in this fashion, we would not be able to make many people migrate there. Only by using special means to clean up America will we be able to lead the Chinese people there. This is the only choice left for us. This is not a matter of whether we are willing to do it or not. What kind of special means is there available for us to clean up America? Conventional weapons such as fighters, cannons, missiles, and battleships won't do. Neither will highly destructive weapons such as nuclear weapons. We are not as foolish as to want to perish together with America by using nuclear weapons, despite the fact that we have been exclaiming that we will have the Taiwan issue resolved at whatever cost. Only by using, this is key, folks, only by using non-destructive weapons that can kill many people will we be able to reserve America for ourselves. There has been rapid development of modern biological technology, and new bioweapons have been invented one after another. Of course, we have not been idle. In the past years, we have seized the opportunity to master weapons of this kind. We are capable of achieving our purpose of cleaning up America all of a sudden. When Comrade Xiaoping was still with us, the party central committee had the per- pers- persipicy, I'm sorry, I'm going to script that word, to make the right decision not to develop aircraft carrier groups and focus instead on developing lethal weapons that can eliminate mass populations of the enemy country. Makes me wonder, like post COVID, post jab discussion, we just see how it's tied into China. Like the fact that this was over 20 years ago, yet look at what we've experienced these past 4 or 5 years. I mean, this is pretty prophetic stuff here, but it gets better. I mean, or maybe it gets worse. And Israel's involved. Imagine that. So we'll continue. From a humanitarian perspective, we should issue a warning to the American people and persuade them to leave America and leave the land they had lived in to the Chinese people. Or at least they should leave half of the United States to be China's colony, because America was first discovered by the Chinese. But would this work? Of course not. Okay. If the strategy does not work, then there is only one choice left to us. That is, use decisive means to clean up America and reserve America for our use in a moment. Our historical experience has proven that as long as we make it happen, nobody in the world can do anything about us. Furthermore, if the United States as a leader is gone, then our other enemies have to surrender to us. Biological weapons are unprecedented in their ruthlessness. But if the Americans do not die, then the Chinese have to die. If the Chinese people are strapped to the present land, a total societal collapse is bound to take place. According to the computation of the author of Yellow Peril, more than half of the Chinese will die, and that figure would be more than 800 million people. Just after the liberation, our yellow land supported nearly 500 million people, while today the official figure of the population is more than 1.3 billion. This yellow land has reached the limit of its capacity. One day, who knows how soon it will come, the great collapse will occur, and it will occur any time, and more than half the population will have to go. We must prepare ourselves for two scenarios. If our biological weapons succeed in a surprise attack, the Chinese people will be able to keep their losses at minimum in a fight against the United States. If, however, the attack fails and triggers a nuclear retaliation from the U.S., China would perhaps suffer a catastrophe in which more than half its population would perish. That is why we need to be ready with air defense systems for our big and medium-sized cities. Whatever the case may be, we can only move forward fearlessly for the sake of our party and state and our nation's future, regardless of the hardships we have to face and the sacrifices we have to make. The population, even if more than half dies, can be reproduced. But if the party falls, everything is gone and forever gone. In Chinese history, in the replacement of dynasties, the ruthless have always won and the benevolent have always failed. The most typical example involved Xiang Wu, the king of Chu, who, after defeating Liu Bang, failed to continue to chase after him and eliminate his forces, and his leniency resulted in Xiang Yu's death and Liu's victory. Therefore, we must emphasize the importance of adopting resolute measures. In the future, the two rivals, China and the U.S., will eventually meet each other in a narrow road, and our leniency to the Americans will mean cruelty toward the Chinese people. Here, some people may want to ask me, what about the several millions of our compatriots in the United States? They may ask, aren't we against Chinese killing other Chinese? These comrades are too pedantic. They are not pragmatic enough. If we had insisted on the principle that the Chinese should not kill other Chinese, would we have liberated China? As for the several million Chinese living in the United States, this is of course a big issue. Therefore, in recent years, we have been conducting research on genetic weapons, i.e., those weapons that do not kill yellow people. But producing a result with this kind of research is extremely difficult. Now, folks, here's where this gets really, really interesting. Okay, this next paragraph, it's like, okay. Of the research done on genetic weapons throughout the world, Israel is the most advanced. Their genetic weapons are designed to target Arabs and protect the Israelis, but even they have not reached the stage of actual deployment. We have cooperated with Israel on some research. Perhaps we can introduce some of the technologies used to protect Israelis and remold these technologies to protect the yellow people. But their technologies are not mature yet, and it is difficult for us to surpass them in a few years. If it has to be 5 or 10 years before some breakthrough can be achieved in genetic weapons, we cannot afford to wait any longer. Old comrades like us cannot afford to wait that long, for we don't have that much time to live. Old soldiers of my age may be able to wait for 5 or 10 more years, but those from the period of the anti-Japanese War or the few old Red Army soldiers cannot wait any longer. Therefore, we have to give up our expectations about genetic weapons. Of course, from another perspective, the majority of those Chinese living in the U.S. have become our burden because they have long been corrupted by the bourgeois liberal values for a long time, and it would be difficult for them to accept our party's leadership. If they survive the war, we would have to launch campaigns in the future to deal with them, to reform them. Do you still remember do you still remember that when we had just defeated the Kuomintang KMT and liberated mainland China, so many people from the bourgeois class and the intellectuals welcomed us so very warmly, but later we had to launch campaigns such as the suppression of the reactionaries and the anti-rightist movement to clean them up and reform them. Some of them were in hiding for a long time and were not exposed until the Cultural Revolution. History has proved that any social turmoil is likely to involve many deaths. Maybe we can put it this way: death is the engine that moves history forward. During the period of the Three Kingdoms, how many people died? When Genghis Khan conquered Eurasia, how many people died? When Manchu invaded the interior of China, how many people died? Not many people died during the 1911 revolution, but when we overthrew the three great mountains during the political campaigns, such as suppression of the reactionaries, 3 anti-campaign, the 5 anti-campaign, at least 20 million people died. We were apprehensive that some young people today would be trembling with fear when they hear about wars and people dying. During wartime, we were used to seeing dead people. Blood and flesh were flying everywhere. Corpses were lying in heaps on the fields, and blood ran like rivers. We saw it all. On the battlefields, everyone's eyes turned red with killing because it was a life and death struggle, and only the brave would survive. It is indeed brutal to kill 1 or 200 million Americans, but that is the only path that will secure a Chinese century in which the CCP leads the world. Folks, I'll read that one more time for you. This is the sentence of the entire speech. It is indeed brutal to kill 1 or 200 million Americas, but that is the only path that will secure a Chinese century in which the CCP leads the world. We, as revolutionary humanitarians, do not want deaths. But if history confronts with a choice between deaths of Chinese and those of Americans, we'd have to pick the latter. As for us, it is more important to safeguard the lives of the Chinese people and the life of our party. That is because, after all, we are Chinese and members of the CCP. Since the day we joined the CCP, the party, life has always been above else. History will prove we made the right choice. Now, when I'm about to finish my speech, you probably understand why we wanted to know whether people would rise up against us if one day we secretly adopt resolute means to clean up America. For over 20 years, China has been enjoying peace, and a whole generation has not been tested by war. In particular, since the end of World War II, there have been many changes in the formats of war, the concepts of war, and the ethics of war. Especially since the collapse of the former Soviet Union and Eastern European communist states, the ideology of the West has come to dominate the world as a whole, and the Western theory of human nature and Western view of human rights have increasingly been disseminated among the young people in China. Therefore, we were not very sure about the people's attitude. If our people are fundamentally opposed to cleaning up America, we will, of course, have to adopt corresponding measures. Why don't we conduct the survey through administrative means instead of through the web? We did what we did for good reason. First of all, we did it to reduce artificial interference and make sure that we got the true thoughts of the people. In addition, it is more confidential and won't reveal the true purpose of our survey. But what is most important is the fact that most of the people who are able to respond to the questions online are from social groups that are relatively well educated and intelligent. They are the hardcore and leading groups that play a decisive role among our people. If they support us, then the people as a whole will follow us. If they oppose us, they'll play a dangerous role of inciting people and creating social disturbance. What turned out to be very comforting is that they did not turn in a blank test paper. In fact, they turned in a test paper with a score over 80. This is the excellent fruition of our party's work in propaganda and education over the past few decades. Of course, a few people under Western influence have objected to shooting at prisoners of war, women, and children. Is everybody crazy? Some others said, the Chinese love to label themselves as a peace-loving people, but actually they're the most ruthless people. The comments are resonant of killing and murdering, sending chills to my heart. Although there are not too many people holding this kind of viewpoint, and they will not affect the overall situation in any significant way, but still need to strengthen the propaganda to respond to this kind of argument. That is to vigorously propagate Comrade He Xin's latest article, which has already been reported to the central government. You may look it up on the website. If you go on the website using keywords to search, you will find out that a while ago, Comrade He Xin pointed out to the Hong Kong Business News during an interview that the U.S. has a shocking conspiracy. According to what he had in hand from September 27 to October 1st, 1995, the Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev Foundation, funded by the U.S., gathered 500 of the world's most important statesmen, economic leaders, scientists, including George W. Bush, he was not the president at the time, the Baroness Thatcher, Tony Blair, Brzezinski, as well as Soros, Bill Gates, futurist John Naisbitt, etc., all of the world's most popular characters, in the San Francisco Fairmont Hotel for a high-level roundtable conference discussing problems about globalization and how to guide humanity to move forward to the 21st century. According to what He Xin had in hand, the outstanding people of the world in attendance thought that in the 21st century, a mere 20% of the world's population will be sufficient to maintain the world's economy and prosperity. The other 80%, or 4/5 of the world's population, will be human garbage unable to produce new values. The people in attendance thought that this excess 80% of the population would be a trash population, and high-tech means should be used to eliminate them gradually. So, man, whoa. So, folks, this is interesting that he's even saying that one of his comrades that gained intel on this, and it could have been a Bilderberg meeting for all I know, that he gained intel on this meeting that happened in 1995 that had that was centered around the United States with over 500 people: Bush, Thatcher, Tony Blair, Brzezinski, Soros, Bill Gates. I mean, these characters we're very well aware of. That basically he's confirming that these people came together and they came to the conclusion that they would need to get rid of 80% of the world's population. So it's like there's some crazy nuggets in this. So he says, since the enemies are secretly planning to eliminate our population, we certainly cannot be infinitely merciful and compassionate to them. Comrade He Xin's article came out at the right time and has proven the correctness of our tit-for-tat battle approach, and Comrade Deng Xiaoping's great foresight to deploy it against the United States military strategy. Certainly, in spreading Comrade He Xin's views, we cannot publish the article in the party newspapers in order to avoid raising the enemy's vigilance. He Xin's conversation may remind the enemy that we have grasped the modern science and technology, including clean nuclear technology as well as biological weapons technology, and we can use powerful measures to eliminate their population on a large scale. The last problem we'll talk about is of firmly seizing the preparations for military battle. Currently, we are at the crossroad of moving forward or backward. Some comrades saw problems flooding everywhere in our country: the corruption problem, the state-owned enterprise problem, the bank's bad accounts problem, environmental problems, society security programs problems, education problems, the AIDS problem, various appeals problems, and even riots problem. These comrades vacillated in the determination to prepare for military battles. They thought they should first grab the political reform first, that is, our own political reform comes first. After resolving the domestic problems, we can then deal with the foreign military battle problem. This reminds me of a crucial period in 1948 in the Chinese Revolution. At that time, the People's Liberation Army's horses were drinking water in the Yangtze River, but they faced extremely complex situation and difficult problems everywhere in the liberated areas, and the Central Authority received emergency reports daily. What to do? We should stop to manage rear areas and internal matters first before moving forward, and press on to pass the Yangtze River with one vigorous effort. Chairman Mao, with his extraordinary wisdom and mettle, gave the marching order, carry on the revolution till the end, and liberated all of China. The previously thought serious conflicting problems were all resolved in this great forward-moving revolutionary wave. Now it seems like we are in the midst of a critical period as the horses were drinking water in the Yangtze River days in the revolutionary era. As long as we resolve the United States problem at one blow, our domestic problems will all be readily resolved. Therefore, our military battle preparation appears to aim at Taiwan, but in fact is aimed at the United States. And the preparation is far beyond the scope of attacking aircraft, carriers, or satellites. Marxism pointed out that violence is the midwife for the birth of China's century. As war approaches, I am full of hope for our next generation. Man, my goodness. It's a lot of reading there. And let me know what you think in the comments about this. But there's so much to take away from this. And I'm not going to, maybe I'll do another show, which is an analysis of this. But take these words as they are, right? Do your own research. Like for me, though, what this shows is that China is not to be a country that we take lightly. The CCP is not an enemy to take lightly. The Chinese people, of which I know a lot, are like, I love them. I love the Chinese people. But the CCP and how it has hijacked China and is doing what it's doing is absolutely an evil and negative entity, pardon me, that I want to see fall as quickly as possible. So anyway, I'm getting hoarse from reading for an hour straight. So we're going to wrap this up. But again, let me know what you think in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are. I really want to hear what you think. It's also interesting in this that they're pointing to the fact that they're like, they've obtained, top secret documents that show that the Western leaders have this goal to depopulate the earth and get rid of 80% of the population. And they're thinking, well, that 80% includes the Chinese people. So we're going to kill all of them first, right? So there's a lot to pull away from this. I hope this was helpful for you. So before we sign off, we'll remind people to make sure you're following the Rumble channel, right? Follow Man in America on Rumble. Follow me on Twitter. It's at Man in America US is the Twitter handle. And stop back in. So I put out shows 4 or 5 times every week. We've got great interviews, solo shows like this. I'd love to have you. But as we sign off, I have 2 sponsors to talk to you about. So first one, let me pull up for you, Balance of Nature. So we talked about prepping and preparedness. So Balance of Nature, what these guys do, it's actually pretty amazing. They take these little vegetable capsules and they've taken fruits and veggies and they've dehydrated and extracted all the nutrients in it and put these in little capsules. So if everyone knows you got to eat your veggies and fruits, it's good for you. But if you forget or you can't, or whatever reason, these little capsules, they give you a lot of the nutrients you'd get from eating fresh fruits and veggies, which is great. Now, for me, my perspective is like, hey, this is great prepping food, okay? Like these little bottles of capsules, I'm storing them in my basement. I'm buying tons of them. I'm storing them up because, look, in the future, if you can't have access to fresh fruits and veggies, pop some of these Balance of Nature's capsules and you can get a lot of the nutrients you'd be missing out. And when there's food shortages, whether it's from war or whatever else, getting your nutrients, like you can't just eat rice and beans. You need to have other nutrients and vitamins. And so Balance of Nature is great for that. And there's also, there's some big savings right now. I think you get up to 50% on a lot of it. So using promo code Seth, SETH, it's balanceofnature.com or 1-800-246-8751. The other sponsor I want to mention, another great company is Sweetamine. So Sweetamine leverages glycine. So basically, if you have inflammation, sore joints, slow recovery from injuries, etc., a lot of it is inflammation. Inflammation actually shouldn't be happening. But the reason inflammation is happening is because we have a shortage of glycine. So glycine is in animals, but it's not in the fat. It's not in the meat. So when you eat the steak, you're actually not getting the glycine you need. Glycine exists in the bones and the bone broths that you make. So if you're drinking bone broths every day, great. But if you're not, Sweetamine offers you, I think it's 8 milligrams of glycine in a serving. It's a sweetener. It's no sugar sweetener that you add to your coffee in the morning, whatever you do. And it gives you that glycine. And what you notice is that glycine is what the body needs to prevent inflammation from happening. So whether it's, swollen from a sunburn or a sore knee from an injury, that inflammation is actually caused by a lack of glycine. So Sweetamine gives you that glycine every morning. So again, go to mysweetamine.com/Seth is the website there. mysweetamine.com/Seth. You'll get a discount on the order. So check that out as well. All right, folks, I am done. I'm done for the evening. My voice is about to go out after all that talking. I hope you enjoyed this show. I hope it was useful for you. Again, I think that we have more than one enemy here in America. It's not like saying that everything is the CCP or everything is these European bankers. I think that it's a very, very complex, field. The enemy field that's up against us is very complicated, and a lot of people say, "Well, look, China's a red herring. It's our own government." But I have to ask the question: is like how much of our own government is being controlled and manipulated by the CCP? So you can't say that, well, look, it's our government's fault. Our government is the deep state. Why are you talking about China? Well, I mean, how many of our politicians are being controlled by the CCP, right? So there's a lot of food for thought here. So anyway, I hope that this is helpful, not too frightening, but it's important for us to know, be prepared. Heavensharvest.com, which we went over. I'll pull it one more time, actually, for everybody. So if you need a reason to think that it's a good idea to buy storable food, well, go read this speech one more time. If your wife or your parents don't want to buy storable food, go read the speech and say, okay, hey, I think we might want to get some storable food. So heavensharvest.com, promo code Seth, SETH, will save you 15%. All right, folks, thank you all dearly. It's great to have you here. Make sure that you're following. That's a big one. Make sure you give the show a thumbs up, leave a comment, let me know what you think. I appreciate all of you. Thank you for being here and joining me on this journey. So take care. God bless. Have a great night. Take care. Bye-bye.